Over the course of several decades, tens of thousands of people have died unnatural deaths here. Massacres, deprivation of freedom, rape, and other human rights disasters have become commonplace. This place was once renowned as a paradise on earth for its magnificent scenery, but now, harsh reality has twisted it into a living hell. Located on the western slopes of the Himalayas, in the upper reaches of the Indus River, Kashmir has always been a strategic battleground due to its exceptional geographic position. Yet despite enduring countless hardships over the centuries, the pride and dignity of the Kashmiri people have never been extinguished. The soft, world-renowned Kashmiri Kashmir and the intricate, exquisite handicrafts are the very embodiment of their resilience and creativity. Looking back at the Kashmir of the past is like recalling a vivid yet distant dream, where civilizations once converged on this land, and the harmony between nature and culture once resonated here. But now, all of this has been buried beneath the smoke of present-day conflict. The end of Kashmir's glorious past began with the partition of India and Pakistan in 1947. From that moment on, this land no longer belonged to the Kashmiri people, but was swept along in the maelstrom of fractured national identities and religious strife, losing any possibility of determining its own fate. From 1947 to the present day in 2025, 4 major wars and countless bloody conflicts have not only completely destroyed the original peace and tranquility of Kashmir, but the ongoing systemic oppression, ethnic strife, and human rights disasters continue to speak to the hardships and suffering endured by the Kashmiri people today. In fact, before the 1990s, disturbances in the Kashmir region caused by various conflicts such as national identity and religious disputes occurred from time to time, but large-scale, organized terrorist attacks like those seen today were still rare. Due to factors such as geographical barriers, ethnic divisions, and cultural diversity, unity has never really been the norm for India. Historically, it has always lacked a tradition of centralized political authority. During the period of British India, although India appeared unified in terms of administrative structure, in reality, it was a multi-ethnic, multi-regime alliance dominated by the colonial authorities and reliant on military force and proxy rule. Because of its loose internal structure and the strong power of local princely states, when the British withdrew in 1947, the entire Indian subcontinent not only quickly split into 2 countries, India and Pakistan, but some important princely states such as Kashmir and Hyderabad even openly expressed their desire for independence, posing a severe challenge to the integration of the newly established nation. In the face of strong separatist forces and a wave of religious extremism, the Indian government had no choice but to adopt a series of tough measures to maintain central authority and domestic order. It was against this backdrop that the Armed Forces Special Powers Act came into being, becoming one of the most controversial legal instruments in India's national security system. This law grants the military near wartime level enforcement powers in disturbed areas, including the authority to detain suspects without a warrant, the right to use lethal force, and in most cases, immunity from judicial prosecution. India has invoked the Armed Forces Special Powers Act in many turbulent regions, including Nagaland, Manipur, Punjab, and other northeastern and northern border areas, where religious or ethnic separatist forces are active. As for the current situation, Indian-administered Kashmir and Jammu and Kashmir are presently the regions where the Indian government enforces the Armed Forces Special Powers Act most extensively and thoroughly. A highly militarized mode of governance, combined with the historical contradictions of religious identity and ethnic division within India, has resulted in the dual crisis of systematic human rights violations and social fragmentation in Jammu and Kashmir today. As the only Muslim-majority state in India, Jammu and Kashmir was granted a high degree of autonomy through Article 370 of the Indian Constitution after joining India. However, within a national structure dominated by Hindus, this autonomy quickly became nominal rather than substantive. For a long time, the local Muslim community has continuously faced structural inequalities in political representation, access to economic resources, and the distribution of social power. If the long-standing oppression and injustice had already bred resentment among the Muslims of Jammu and Kashmir, then the 1986 Legislative Assembly election, rife with fraud and manipulation, undoubtedly became the fuse that completely ignited the conflict. In this election, Muslim political parties were originally expected to win a majority of seats, but in the end, they secured less than 10% of the representation. Some candidates were even arrested after the election without due process. Among them were Syed Salahuddin and Yasin Malik, who would later become leaders of armed organizations. To a large extent, this was also because peaceful means were suppressed and legitimate political avenues were blocked. As a result, Kashmiris soon turned to armed struggle to pursue their rights. This meant that the involvement of Pakistan, India's arch-rival, created an opportunity. On one hand, there was the increasingly severe insurgency in Jammu and Kashmir. On the other, the Indian government's hardline policies. The result of fighting violence with violence was that Jammu and Kashmir subsequently fell into an extremely chaotic situation. According to official data released by the Indian government, from 1990 to 2009, about 47,000 people died in the insurgency, and 3,400 went missing. Even more shocking, according to multiple human rights organization reports, under the Protection of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which grants special powers to the military, Indian security forces composed of the army, border security personnel, and others have used systematic rape as a weapon to retaliate against Kashmiri civilians. According to a study published by Médecins Sans Frontières in 2006, as one of the regions with the most widespread sexual violence in the world today, more than 10% of over 500 respondents interviewed in Jammu and Kashmir between 1989 and 2005 reported being victims of sexual violence. Over 60% of respondents had heard of incidents of rape, and more than 14% had even personally witnessed rape. In stark contrast to the extremely high rates of sexual violence is the Indian government's blatant tolerance toward the perpetrators. According to the United Nations 2019 report on human rights in Kashmir, over the past 30 years, the Indian central government has almost never approved prosecutions against armed personnel for violations of the law. The 2017 Human Shield incident in Kashmir is widely regarded as one of the most representative cases of human rights controversies caused by Indian security forces in Jammu and Kashmir in recent years. The incident took place in Srinagar. A 26-year-old Kashmiri youth, after being arrested, was forcibly tied to the front of a military vehicle by soldiers to intimidate protesters along the route. After a video of this act went viral online, it sparked strong condemnation from both domestic and international public opinion. However, after the incident was exposed, the Indian authorities not only refused to offer any form of compensation or apology to the victim, but instead publicly commended the officer involved, claiming he had innovatively avoided casualties. This move was widely seen as tacit approval or encouragement of violent law enforcement. This incident demonstrated the actions of Indian security forces in Indian-controlled Kashmir. Indian security forces have violated legal and humanitarian norms in Kashmir, exposing the Indian government's systemic bias and governance problems, which have weakened its legitimacy and credibility in the region. In 2019, while the deep-rooted structural contradictions within Jammu and Kashmir remained unresolved, the Indian government announced the abolition of Article 370 of the Constitution, officially revoking Jammu and Kashmir's special autonomous status and splitting the region into two union territories, the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and the Union Territory of Ladakh. This move did, in fact, provide the Indian central government with a more direct administrative channel for governance, and also created institutional conditions for local infrastructure development and economic investment. However, from the perspective of the Kashmiri people, this decision was seen as a breach of India's historical commitments, and it also sparked deep concerns about the marginalization of their political identity and cultural recognition. The forced integration not only failed to ease existing ethnic divisions, but instead further intensified the sense of political alienation in the region, exacerbated already tense social sentiments and border situations, and made the already volatile situation in Kashmir even more uncontrollable. Compared to the highly militarized and continuously turbulent Indian-controlled Kashmir, the Pakistan-controlled Kashmir region appears outwardly calmer, with relatively fewer public incidents of conflict. However, this relative peace does not mean the absence of problems. Rather, it conceals another form of repression. Describing the governance of Pakistan-controlled Kashmir as bloodless yet oppressive could not be more accurate. Whether it is Azad Kashmir, which nominally enjoys autonomous status, or Gilgit-Baltistan, which has yet to be formally incorporated into Pakistan's constitutional administrative system, the Pakistani central government generally adopts a security-centered governance approach in these regions to maintain border stability and national control. This includes strict censorship of the media and freedom of expression, secret residency systems, and military-led administrative arrangements. Although this implicit warlord system has maintained a superficial order in the short term, in an environment lacking democratic participation and space for political expression, it has also quietly accumulated social discontent and psychological tension. In the long run, this unhealthy political environment not only undermines public trust in the government, but may also provide fertile ground for the rise of religious radicalization and regional extremism, exposing Pakistan-administered Kashmir to new potential risks of instability in the future. Looking at the long and painful journey of Kashmir, this is not only the deepest wound in the process of nation building in South Asia, but also a microcosm of the international community's long-standing neglect of regional ethnic aspirations and the protection of human rights. Today, Kashmir remains shrouded in uncertainty, whether it is the frequent border clashes between India and Pakistan or the highly militarized local governance. All of these speak to the difficult struggle of ordinary Kashmiris caught between national security and personal freedom. What does the future hold for Kashmir? Will it continue to be swept away in the tide of nationalism and great power narratives, or will it achieve true peace and freedom? This land, which is both a paradise and a purgatory, is still waiting for a true awakening that belongs to the people of Kashmir.